Restoring an old house is not always as easy as you think it is, but I started off by exploring this tower room, and this video is all about the tower room alone. I found out that the metal bar that was holding the walls together, and you can see that bar right here in the video, was actually lifting up the floor tiles. And these are very old tiles. Those are clay tiles. Luckily I had some spares, but they were not the right size, so I had to cut them to size, and then I started to fix the floor. Now the floor was damaged in many different areas. But before I could place the floor, I had to lower that bar, and that was not all that easy. I had to grind it off, then I welded it together, and then we also put a bracelet across it so it could not get apart, because I don't want the walls to separate. There were other areas on the floor that I had to take care of as well. Now, you always have a lot of debris, so before I continued, I made myself a slide so I could bring down all the debris from the ceiling. And you've seen the ceiling before. This is a plaster ceiling. This was put in much later than the original ceiling. So I had to get all this stuff down. I also had to fill out some holes in the walls, and here you see actually all the old rafters of that, and the birds did their best. I mean, I had to burn a whole pile of stuff. Now, instead of buying all new wood from a building market, I decided to buy a pile of oak and then create my own planks that I could use then for that new ceiling. But I needed to enforce the ceiling. It probably wasn't really necessary, but I felt it was, so I rather be safe than sorry. So I started adding a whole bunch of beams to make sure that the old oak beams were in a good state. So here you see me removing the fake ceiling, because some people did that. And now, with the fake ceiling removed, we see the old ceiling, which I shot blasted. The next step up was to fix the windows, and the windows were totally gone. I already had built some oak frames for the windows, and as you see here, we got lots of containers with debris. So I had to remove the old windows first, and I don't know if you've ever done this, but this is a pretty nasty job to do because the glass will break easy, everything is rotten. Luckily, there's nobody around me, so I can take a few little risks. You never know, you can see how the stuff is falling down. And unfortunately, these windows were pretty heavy and tall. But anyway, I got them all in the container, so now it was time to install the new windows. And that's why I, first of all, put the scaffold up, because I wanted to take care of the walls first, the joints, before I put the window in, because otherwise it would be too difficult. By the way, the height here is about 12 meters above the ground, so it's fairly high up. I was finished with repointing the wall, so now I could continue with dragging these big window frames upstairs. And they were really heavy, around 65 kilograms a piece, and I did all this on my own. But with the scaffold set up in stages, I could actually fit those windows into place, then level them out, and then lock them in place with some pure foam. This is pretty good stuff. It also isolates the wood actually from the wall itself. You might have noticed that the walls are very thick. They are about 1 meter thick. Now, but all this now done, now I could continue with the walls. And I did measure the humidity on the walls, because I don't want to cover up any humid wall. But they were all fairly dry, so I decided to use drywall in front of the old wall. I made some framing, both with wood and metal studs, as you can see here, and then I glued onto the wooden beam the metal studs, and they are pretty wide studs, and then you just lock them into the wall wherever you need to, because these are very high up. It's about 3 meters 20, I think. And then it was time to put up the drywall. I'm using 14 millimeter drywall, and here you see me locking the studs in place. And as I had to screw so many things, well, I'm a bit of a lazy guy. I used a automatic screwdriver. And then it was time to plaster. And that was a lot of plastering, as you can see. Now this is just one wall. This is the other wall. This is the original one. So I did not place drywall on all the walls. I just placed it on some. So there's a lot of work on these walls and a lot of sanding. So I always play a joint filler, then a joint finisher and another finisher. And now it was time to put in the glazing on the windows. And these are the wings of the window. And you see me putting up the spacers and installing the glazing. And to be honest, that's pretty heavy stuff to install. I had to drag it upstairs. And yeah, it's not always that easy. Anyway, I was able to get them in and everything worked out just fine, as you can see here. I just had to make some additional attachments to lock the frames, the window wings, not the frames. This is just a metal clip I made just to close them for now. The next step up was to install the electrical installation, the outlets and the light switches. And I use always pre-cabled cables, basically. You see some OSB panels here on the side on the windows, and those are not straight on the wall. I always prevent that. They are actually insulated from the wall with this insulation foam, so they can't get wet at all. And installing some more drywall or glue in drywall, both systems work fine. Holding it for a little bit, and here you see the roughly finished walls in drywall. Of course, the corners had to be finished, and I like to use these metal grids to enforce the corners. And then, of course, again, we have to put the joint filler up. Now, some of the moldings on the top of the ceiling had to be remade, so I had to make them out of plaster. And then again, it was time for sanding and sanding. And here you see the part almost finished. So now it was time for some electricity in the attic, because the attic needed some lights because it was pitch dark in there. There are no windows. And there you see different circuits for lights and sockets and some big TL lights, so I have sufficient light because I still had to enforce the roof and insulate the roof. And this is all the wood that's going up into the attic. And here we are in the attic, where I'm going to install first of all a damp shield on the floor on the oak planks that we installed. And then on the sides I'm installing actually a frame against the rafters, so I have a vertical stud, if you want to call it that way. And then we nail them all in place. I probably didn't have to do this, but since I had the time, why not? So now it was time to insulate the roof. And yes, we get often quite a lot of rain. Now, these insulation panels, they will go on the side on top of the walls. Now remember, the walls are 1 meter thick, so that's where they go on. The ceiling itself, the oak planks, they will get a much thicker insulation panel, as you see right here. This is really, really thick. I think it's about 18 centimeters. So I filled up the whole floor with that, taped it all off with this special aluminum tape, and you can see you can actually stand on that insulation. It's pretty solid. Now the opening here is the hatch to get to the attic. Well, now it's time to clean up all that debris. I still had to make a door, and I wanted to make a old classic vintage door, and again I used the oak that I bought to create the door from scratch. Starting off with taking all the measurements, cutting the planks to length, and then put them on the planer, making sure everything is clean and square. And it took me quite a while, and I wanted to make sure that I had the right thickness, so here it goes to the thickness planer in all 4 directions, and then I double checked if everything was actually square. So now it was time to put the grooves and the teeth in. I think it's called tongue and teeth or something like this, but here you see it on the finished planks. Now it was just a matter of putting them all together, but of course I still had to make the frame. And here you see one example on how I made the frame for the door. Just using a saw blade on my router, and then do a couple of runs in each direction, and then you actually have the pin. not very complicated to do. Of course, you could do all this with a handsaw or a manual saw, but you know, like I said before, I'm a little bit of a lazy bum. If I can make it automatic or easier for me, I will. And here I'm just drilling the hole where the pin can go in. Glue it all together and then tighten it up, making sure everything is square. And then to hold these pins into place, I'm using some tabs with glue. No screws in this case. Now I'm gonna screw down the planks to the frame, and I could have nailed it, but I prefer screws. It's a lot stronger. Now, of course, the screws are visible, so I put some glue inside, and then I have sawdust. I just wipe it on it. Even big dents, put a piece of wood in, sufficient glue, and then the sawdust, and just wipe it over. And here you have one of those old locks and the hinges, and then I was about ready to get it upstairs in the tower room and then install it. And now it was actually time to install the heating in the tower room. Now the tower room is a occasional room, so I decided to install infrared panels. For that, of course, I had made outlets already around the boarding, and here I'm just preparing the hooks where the panel will go. These panels are pretty handy, and they are quite good because they radiate far-end infrared, so you feel the heat, but it doesn't heat up the air really. The thermostat and the controller, well, they were being prepared, and you can see there's a lot of cables, and of course I'm running separate circuits all together for the heating panels. And here we put the controller into the wall that will control the temperature and the time, so it's really programmable. And I have to say, it heats up pretty well in that room. And again, it's just a temporary room. We don't sit there every day. We sit there every so often. I still had to do the lights as well for that room, and I wasn't too sure what to do with this. So I decided to go for these bulbs just hanging down from the ceiling. And here you have a bit of an overview of the completed room. The floor is done, the walls are done, they are painted, and you can see the very old clay tiles. In fact, they date back to 1616. I made plinths all around the room in oak. They are fairly tall. I also had to create a hatch where the old staircase used to be, and then I have one accent wall, which is the red one. The other walls are all white, and I like some crazy ornaments sometimes, as you can see. This room by itself is about 6.5 meters by 6.5, but it's about 4 meters high. There is more work to be done, as you can see. This is going to be the entrance to the tower room, but more videos will follow on this. Here I installed just brand new rafters, so keep an eye out because more is coming very soon on how we have installed the full entrance, but also a bathroom at the entrance to the tower room. So thank you for viewing, and I'll see you in my next video. Please leave any comments behind if you have any remarks. And by the way, you can see all of this in great detail on my channel. Just look for the proper playlist about restoring old houses. Thank you for viewing again, and see you later. Bye bye.